Ladies and gentlemen, needless to say, Call of Duty has been through the ringer lately. We have had some really high highs and some really low lows. By the way, if you've noticed, I'm really sunburnt right now. It's a thing I'm going through separate from Call of Duty. But as far as Call of Duty goes, my friend TheXclusiveAce made a video lately, and it was specifically talking about how Call of Duty is killing its community. And I wanted to kind of make a response video, an addition video, because I don't disagree with anything he is saying in that video, but predominantly he is focused on multiplayer and multiplayer alone. And I wanted to make a video just kind of adding to that, adding some points and some different changes that I would like to see made to improve what they are currently doing, because I think it is honestly very easy to say at this point, Call of Duty may not be directly killing its community, but at the very, very least, they aren't doing anything to improve it. And that is a big issue. Now, I'll have his video linked down in the description, but some of the things he goes over for lack of community is disbanding lobbies. The removal of that makes it so it's hard to build a community, see those people, get competitive with them, things along those lines. He talks about how they prioritize buying things over earning things. And because of that, there is a lack of reward system within the game, which I completely agree about. And that is where my biggest point in all of this comes in, and that is fragmentation of community. And this is something that we have seen in Call of Duty before that they have addressed. We saw this when they were adding in essentially DLC. Previously in Call of Duty, you would have to buy DLC maps. And because of that, when you bought a DLC pack, the only people that you could play with were other people with those DLC packs. It fragmented the community, making it so that the only people you're playing with are the people that spend more money, generally speaking, the better players, whereas the people who just bought the base game would then be playing together. It created a whole thing. And from that, eventually, we completely saw the DLC model get removed. Enter in Modern Warfare 2019. Remember how I said there were many highs and many lows in Call of Duty in the past years? I think it's easy to say Modern Warfare 2019 was probably the biggest boon we've seen in Call of Duty in a very, very long time. There was a lot of reasons for that, one of which was COVID was happening. People were stuck at home playing video games. Therefore, it was a way of building community as opposed to losing it. People would hop on Call of Duty every single night because they were stuck at home and had nothing else to do, and it was a good way to do so. But at that time, we saw a really good combination of multiplayer and Warzone. They were kind of brought together, and one person could play multiplayer, one person could play Warzone. You could rank up weapons in multiplayer, use them in Warzone. And when Warzone was implemented, it added a little bit of an extra layer. People weren't just playing to get a good kill death or do well in game anymore. They were playing for wins. This is something that added a little bit more competition to Call of Duty, which I do not think was a bad thing. But since then, the community has been fragmented more. If we look way, way back in the day, we had campaign, we had co-op, which oftentimes was zombies, and then we had multiplayer. Multiplayer was generally focused as the bread and butter of the game, the thing that brought everyone to play it. Those other things, campaign and zombies, were kind of the extracurriculars. Yes, zombies built a great community and there was definite replayability there, but I think it's easy to say back then the bread and butter was multiplayer. All the focus went there, and that's what drove profits and drove people to play. Now we have many other things. Warzone being the biggest one. The fact that it is free to play is definitely a very large thing. But the other things that we have that were implemented this year was DMZ, an extraction shooter, and raids, which is essentially something, let's just call it from Destiny, a first-person shooter raid, but they've been implemented in many, many games before. The problem with this is I think it's good that they are adding these things and adding new things. In fact, DMZ and the raids are probably my two favorite things in this game. The problem is they take away from multiplayer and Warzone as opposed to adding to it. Now, how can this be done in a positive way? I think we can look at other games and take some ideas from there. If we look at Destiny, for example, when you play the raid, by the time you complete it, they're difficult, but when you do, you are given rewards. These rewards can then be used in PvP to make your character better. Now, I'm not saying you should have to complete a raid to get more health and then have an advantage. However, if you were to say have a chance of unlocking a weapon and the only way to do that was completing a raid, then you could use it in multiplayer, then you could use it in Warzone. That would add a lot of replayability. And if they added a bunch of these, raids would become much bigger of a thing. And it wouldn't be what you're buying gives you things in game. It would be what you play earns you rewards. Now, there's definite problems with that. If we look back at DMZ, for example, when DMZ was first launched, the M13 was a weapon that you could only earn by completing a specific challenge in DMZ. A lot of people got really, really annoyed with that. Don't get me wrong, I completely see why. People who just want to play multiplayer or just want to play Warzone want to be able to just play those and not dive into anything else. But I think that's a decision that Call of Duty has to make as a whole. If they are adding these other things like an extraction shooter or raids into the game, it should be an integral part of the game. You should have to do those things to be a 100%er in the game. However, what they are seemingly doing is making multiple different games that are just under the same label. They have the extraction shooter, they have the raids, they have the multiplayer, they have the battle royale. Some of which do cross over and cross over pretty well, but the fragmentation because of it is separating people in different directions. I think that is easy to see, and I think that's a design philosophy that they have to decide internally. Are these going to be separate entities or something that is completely built together? From the beginning, when Modern Warfare 2019 happened, they said Warzone and multiplayer were going to be together. You rank up in one, you rank up in the other. And I think that's a great system, but I think they could have to commit to that all around. They could do the same thing with DMZ. If there were unlocks that you could only get through DMZ that then could be used in multiplayer and that was the only way to get them, they kind of have done that. But if they were to do that, it would put much more priority of a community as a whole as aside from a fragmented community. And I think a lot of people may disagree with this. And if you do, feel free to let me know down in the comments. So that is the one big thing that I don't think Ace talked enough about in his video that I wanted to add on. And one thing that I think Ace failed to mention in his video, he was talking a lot about how people are prioritized to buy the cool things in game, spend money and get better blueprints, get better calling cards. And that's the things people show off in game. And that is 100% true, but the one thing that I think he failed to mention is Call of Duty is not what it used to be. It's not a game that you spent $70 on, had it for a year, they updated it throughout the year, it became better. Call of Duty is now a live service game. When they introduced Battle Pass, when they introduced seasons, when they introduced all of these different things, Call of Duty is a game as a service. The game that we have at the end of the year is very different than the game we have at the beginning, which I don't think is necessarily a bad thing, but when you introduce these fragmentations in the community and you have more prioritization on the things that you buy, like microtransactions, having this be a $70 game just no longer makes any sense. And if they're going to continue in this direction, Call of Duty should be free to play. If they are going to prioritize things you earn and things like that in game, okay, $70 makes a lot of sense. But if all of the good stuff in game and cool looking stuff and things people want to buy is all microtransactions, why are we paying $70 to begin with in the first place? It's a question I've never understood the answer to, and I don't think we're going to get an answer or a change to that anytime soon. The other thing is past Call of Duty games. So this is one that has been really big lately. And a lot of people say everyone needs to be focused on the current Call of Duty game, but that's not what Call of Duty is. Call of Duty goes back 20 years and there's many games that people like to go back to, play, and part of that creates the community as well. Well, recently, hackers have got their hands on older Call of Duty games and not only just hack the games to make them unplayable, but if you play them, people can get your IP addresses, take them and do horrible things to you, knock you offline, get your personal information, a bunch of things. Now, people out there, communities like SM2 have created their own games in order for people to be able to play these older Call of Duties in a refreshed way on better servers, things like that without hacking. Well, Activision has come out and said, no longer will that happen. We are shutting down these things like Plutonium, like SM2, and people will no longer be able to develop things for Call of Duty. Only Activision and our studios can do that. Now, the problem is those older Call of Duty games are now going untouched. They're unplayable. If you do play them, you're literally at risk. And that is a really big issue. And it's something that has not been addressed by them whatsoever. Essentially making these games that are often still $60 if you are buying them new, unplayable. Because remember, as we said earlier, that bread and butter is multiplayer. And if that's not playable, the campaign shouldn't be worth $60. I don't think any Call of Duty campaign should be. And I make a lot of campaign videos. Now, one thing that I don't see a lot of people talking about with this is currently there's an acquisition going on. Microsoft is trying to buy Activision Blizzard, and with that, all of the old Call of Duty games. And it was a big rumor that when they would do so, they would take all the old Call of Duty games, put them on Game Pass, and that would incentivize people to play them more and buy Game Pass. And I think that makes a lot of sense. The problem is, if these old multiplayer games are completely unplayable, who's going to be going on at the risk of losing their IP address and things like that? That is a big issue, and these things need to be addressed. I would love to go back and play the original Modern Warfare 2. Let's be honest, if I do, I'm going to get hacked. There's going to be hackers on the game. I'm not going to be able to connect to servers. It is really not going to be an enjoyable time. Again, that is part of the Call of Duty community as a whole. So when they're looking at these things, the two things that I think they need to look at are past Call of Duties and how they're going to be implemented. And on top of that, how Call of Duty is going to be a thing as a whole, not these big separate entities. There's other things that of course need to be focused on, like the community in the game, the things that Ace talked about, the disbanding lobbies, the lack of passion in the community, things like that. Those are very big things for the game, but he addressed those very well. I felt like I didn't need to. Again, this was a video adding to it, not just taking away from what he said. So like I said, check out his video down below. I'm very curious to hear what you guys have to say about this. A lot of you may disagree what I have to say about building the game as a whole as opposed to these separate entities. But hey, if you have any theories, you have any ideas, you have any comments on this, let me know down in the comments. If you enjoyed this kind of rant thing, hit that like button. If you're new to the channel, hit that subscribe, turn notifications on. We have lots of story stuff coming to the channel. I'm really excited for it, so make sure you stay tuned. As always, thank you so much for watching, and until next time, peace out.
We are reaching for the stars, but we're making this too hard.